Welcome to Miss Rowe Classroom. Today, we'll discuss Part 1, Memories of Childhood by Zitkala Shah. Before we begin, please subscribe if you find the content helpful. Your support encourages us to create quality videos. Sharing explanations also helps reach more people. Thank you for being part of Miss Rowe Classroom's journey. Now let's continue with the explanation. The Cutting of My Long Hair is an autobiographical excerpt from the chapter The School Days of an Indian Girl, published in 1900 in Atlantic Monthly. Zitkala Shah Gertrude Simmons Bonin, a Native American woman who recalls her traumatic experiences as a young girl at a white missionary boarding school. It depicts the cultural disconnection, oppression, and emotional turmoil she endured while being forced to assimilate into mainstream American culture. Let's begin with the summary. In The Cutting of My Long Hair, Zitkala Shah recounts her traumatic experience at a white-run boarding school where Native American children were forced to assimilate. On the first day, she feels alienated by the unfamiliar environment, oppressive routines, and cultural disconnection. She learns that her long hair, a symbol of strength and honor in her culture, will be cut, a mark of shame and submission. After she attempts to hide, she is forcibly found and restrained, and her braids are shorn. The act symbolizes the erasure of her cultural identity, leaving her dehumanized, powerless, and yearning for the comfort of her mother. Let's begin with the chapter. Zitkala Shah describes her first day at the boarding school as bitter cold, with snow on the ground and bare trees. Another core memory of hers is the constant clamor of bells, shoes, and unfamiliar voices, which creates a chaotic and overwhelming atmosphere. The harsh noises and murmurs of an unfamiliar language leave her feeling trapped, her spirit yearning for the freedom she has lost. The narrative begins on Zitkala Shah's first day at the boarding school, described as a harsh, cold, and unfamiliar environment called the Land of Apples. The phrase is metaphorical. It refers to the boarding school system, which represents the mainstream white American culture imposed on Native Americans during that time. Apples, a European import to North America, symbolize something foreign and imposed, much like the assimilationist practices at these schools. To understand the phrase's significance, an excerpt of a section, The Big Red Apples, from the chapter Impressions of an Indian Childhood, that falls before The Cutting of My Long Hair, will be displayed on the screen. Please pause and read the italicized part to understand the context of the words Land of Apples. After studying the excerpt, we now understand the phrase's significance. Zitkala Shah remembers how missionaries promised her a land full of red apples. She had never seen apple trees before, so picking all the apples she wanted sounded exciting. To her, this sounded like an excellent adventure. However, her mother was less excited and worried about the missionaries' true intentions. The red apples, or the Land of Apples, symbolizes false promises of a better life in a foreign world, leading to her loss of cultural identity. Zitkala Shah highlights the discomfort of losing her cultural identity. She feels humiliated in her new clothes, stripped of her traditional blanket and moccasins. The tightly clinging dresses and stiff shoes of the boarders contrast sharply with her Indian cultural norms. Unlike her traditional attire, she is dressed in immodest clothes. The boys in her group also appear uncomfortable, highlighting the shared unease among the native children. In the dining room, Zitkala Shah struggles with the unfamiliar practice of eating by formula. It reflects this highly structured and ritualized process where each bell signifies a specific action in the meal's order, stripping away any personal choice or spontaneity. First bell signals at the beginning of the assembly, where the pupils gather for the meal. Drawing a chair to sit on is part of the formal ritual. On the second bell, all students are expected to be seated at this point. Zitkala Shah, unfamiliar with the protocol, initially sits too soon, which makes her feel awkward. The final bell signals the commencement of the meal. At this point, everyone begins eating after the Quaker-style prayer or moral reflection led by the man, who likely offered brief guidance or a blessing consistent with Quaker worship practices. The school's dining rituals confuse her. She mistakes when to sit and feels humiliated as she struggles to follow the unfamiliar routines. When she prematurely sits down, she is embarrassed to find she is the only one seated. She shyly adjusts her actions, observing the others to avoid further mistakes. Later in the morning, her friend, Judavin, who knows some English, informs her that the pale-faced women plan to cut their long hair. Long hair symbolizes honor and strength among their people, while short or shingled hair symbolizes mourning or cowardice. The haircut is seen as a deep cultural violation. Judavin advises submission, citing the strength of their oppressors, but Zitkala Shah fiercely refuses, vowing to resist. Judavin suggests that they should submit, but Zitkala Shah rebels. She is determined to resist. Seizing an opportunity, Zitkala Shah sneaks away and hides under a bed in a dimly lit room with 3 white beds and dark green curtains. She crouches in a corner, trembling with fear as she hears voices calling her name and footsteps searching nearby. Despite her fear, she remains silent as women and girls search for her. Despite her silence and efforts to stay hidden, the searchers find her under the bed. She is forcibly dragged out, kicking and scratching in resistance. Zitkala Shah is tied to a chair as she struggles and cries aloud. She feels the cold blades of scissors cutting her thick braids, marking a profound loss of her cultural identity and spirit. This act of forcibly cutting her hair symbolizes the loss of her cultural identity and spirit. She reflects on the series of indignities she has endured since being separated from her mother. First, being stared at as an object of curiosity and denied compassion. Second, treated like a wooden puppet. Third, now losing her long hair, a sacred symbol of her heritage. The cutting of her hair is the final blow, leaving her feeling powerless and dehumanized, like men of many little animals driven by a herder. Now let's shift to the theme of the excerpt. First, cultural erasure. The haircut symbolizes the systematic attempt to strip Native American children of their traditions, values, and identity. Second, oppression and loss of autonomy. Zitkala Shah's experiences highlight the brutal imposition of power and the lack of personal agency for marginalized communities. Third, resistance and trauma. Her initial defiance reflects her resilience, while her eventual submission reveals the crushing weight of systemic oppression. Fourth, isolation and loss of support. The absence of her mother's comforting presence and guidance deepens the emotional impact of her trauma. Next point is justification of the excerpt's title. The excerpt's title captures Zitkala Shah's forced assimilation by the white settlers, symbolizing the oppressive erasure of her cultural identity and autonomy. Stripped of her heritage and dignity, she is left feeling dehumanized and powerless, reflecting the larger trauma of cultural assimilation faced by Native American communities. To summarize, the excerpt highlights the brutal cultural oppression faced by Native Americans during forced assimilation. Zitkala Shah's vivid narrative reveals the emotional and psychological impact of losing her cultural identity. Though ultimately overpowered, her resistance symbolizes the inner strength of marginalized Native communities striving to preserve their traditions. The forced cutting of her hair becomes a powerful metaphor for the erasure of her heritage, leaving her feeling dehumanized and disconnected. Her account serves as a poignant reminder of the injustices endured by indigenous peoples and the resilience required to confront such systemic oppression. This concludes the explanation of Part 1, Memories of Childhood by Zitkala Shah. Please visit our website missroclassroom.com for summaries, character sketches, themes, vocabulary, MCQs, important passages, and question and answers for Class 12 English chapters or poems, including extract-based questions. Stay tuned. In the next session, we'll discuss Memories of Childhood, Part 2, We Too Are Human Beings by Bama. If you like the content, please press the notification bell, subscribe, like, comment, and share the video. Bye-bye.